Hello, everyone. I'm Harpreet Singh, welcoming you to the Future of Work Pioneers podcast. Today, we have with us Sabra Horn, the Chief of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency Innovation Hub at the Department of Homeland Security. Prior to her time at the DHS, she served at the National Security Agency as the Deputy Chief for Information Sharing and Collaboration, facilitating the sharing of the NSA's most highly classified intelligence. She was senior advisor to the NSA's Threat Operations Center leadership. She was previously Director of Communications at the Department of Justice Office of Justice Programs and also served as the Chief of Staff at the ODNI in the stand-up of the National Maritime Intelligence Center. Prior to her government service, she had a storied career in academic publishing as the senior executive editor for the largest list of academic criminal justice publications at Wadsworth Publishing. She holds a master's degree in public administration from the Harvard Kennedy School of Government and a bachelor's in English from the College of Charleston. Sabra, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Harpreet. It's great to be here.
Before we jump into specific questions, it would be great if you could provide our viewers some insight into how you have progressed into your current position. You have a very impressive and a broad background. If you can tell us how you made your move into the government and subsequently ended up in your current role, that would be wonderful.
That's great, Harpreet. Well, it's been an interesting journey, that's for sure. I will say I started my career in academic publishing and had an 18-year career doing what was really an incredible job. I got to travel the country and talk to academics and hear about their research. But I will say my life changed on 9/11, as did many other people. I decided then that I wanted to become part of the fight in helping to keep our nation safe. I didn't understand what that might look like. It took me a while to figure out how to be able to translate my skills into something that would work for government. And I made my way to the Harvard Kennedy School in order to get a master's in strategic management of national security. I then moved to DC in 2005 to basically start my career in government. And I was lucky enough on day 3 to interact with Mary Margaret Graham, an amazing woman who was the first director of collection for the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. And I was able to use my skill set and experience working open source across the 16 intelligence agencies, understanding how we gather information and who might need it. It just was very different. I had worked with professors getting information to students, and it's very different how they work within the intelligence community, but it's the same type of application. I would say I've been very lucky in the last 15 years within my government career, and have had the opportunity to be part of the ODNI stand-up and to really focus on 9/11 and the report from Congress and ensuring that our country was safer after that time. I was able to be part of the National Security Agency just following the leaks of classified information by Edward Snowden, which had a devastating impact on both the agency and our country. And I am really excited to be part of DHS and to be part of the CISA mission in ensuring that we keep our country safer through critical infrastructure and ensuring cyber and physical security threats are mitigated.
So now you are charged with building and bringing to life CISA's information hub. What do you see as some of the driving forces leading to innovation within DHS, and have you encountered any obstacles?
I would love to say not at all, but as we know, that's not the reality in any job, is it? So I will say what is really interesting is watching what has taken place in the last several years with innovation across federal agencies. We are, in many ways, we all know that government sometimes lags our partners in the commercial sector, and they have long had an eye on how important innovation is and how important innovation is to ensuring that the private sector is really keeping pace with technology as it's changed. The government, I think, has come into that over the last several years, and it is really remarkable to see. There's virtually no agency that you can go to that doesn't have some emphasis on innovation, whether it be specific mission-focused operational divisions, or whether it be a broader means to gather input from the workforce, or whether it be very specific technologies that can help support mission support elements such as the CIO, the CFO, or the human resources area. So it's been remarkable to see how much more mature the innovation space has become in government, but obviously there's much more that we need to do. I think we can also look to the fact that we know that government by definition is a much more deliberative space. You want by necessity to ensure that there is the deliberation across the various agencies and across the different arms of government to ensure that we end up with the best overall policies or decisions or operational responses. But oftentimes that comes in conflict with the mission-driven need and the speed in which we need to deliver mission. And so we can look to some of our partners like DoD or some of the operational aspects of and agencies within DHS, such as FEMA, who has to respond during emergencies, to see that we do have the ability to pick up the pace and to do things quickly in a mission-driven environment. And I think we can see how that has really taken place. I would say innovation in government comes down to several things, which is creating repeatable processes. What do we make happen in a way that everyone across the agency can employ those mechanisms, rather than doing heroic efforts or Hail Marys that are a once in a lifetime but never to be replicated? It's really about creating processes and procedures and ways of working so that everybody can be part of innovation. It's also looking at the strategic goals of the mission and the agency to ensure that innovation is really resonating with exactly what the agency is trying to do overall, rather than going off onto its own and picking the next shiny object that should be brought to life. That's not really helping the agency overall. And finally, I think it really is about building a culture of innovation within the agency such that every single individual within the workforce feels responsibility for bringing innovation and finding within their own role how they might bring that innovation to life.
So tell us about Innovation Hub. What are you trying to achieve there?
Great. First and foremost, we, as I just mentioned, we're trying to build a culture of innovation such that every CISA workforce member feels responsible and able to be part of an innovation process, regardless of what their role is. We have both mission as well as mission support workforce members, and we want to make sure that each person is able to see how they might be able to look at the specific processes or policies or procedures that exist to govern their job, and how they might be able to make those more nimble, agile, rapid, easier, cheaper, faster, less painful, so that everybody feels empowered. And we're creating a crowdsourcing mechanism to enable capturing and then prioritizing the workforce ideas as well. We are really trying to focus on not just our mission innovation efforts. That is primarily focused within our Chief Technology Officer, who's working very closely with our Science and Technology Division within the broader DHS mechanism. But we're really focused on the mission support aspects of what it is that we do, whether it be our financial operations or our IT operations, our human resources, security, things of that sort. There's so much that we can do to bring innovation to those important areas. And I think that part often gets left out of discussions because, again, it's not the sexy thing, right? Oh, we want to pick this bright and shiny object and employ it right away. So I think there's some good work to be done there, and we're trying to take a look at that in a systematic fashion, and we have some good early wins that we're able to leverage. I would say we're also trying to figure out how we can do more with less, and I think technology can help enable that in so many ways. I can think back to, when I worked with DHS when I was at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, and, oftentimes a hunt and peck approach to mission-driven operations was what was employed many, many years ago. We simply don't have the time or the resources in order to work in that methodology any longer, and nor does anyone want to do that, right? Our world has changed, our world has matured, and the things that we're using in our lives each and every day, we should be able to use in our work days as well.
It's interesting you mentioned crowdsourcing. Are you leveraging crowdsourcing for your workforce, or are you using it for identifying security threats? How are you using that kind of a paradigm?
So within the U.S. government, crowdsourcing of the workforce is a very common and popular approach to figuring out problems that have to be addressed. So I would point to, within DHS, we have some great examples, such as the Innovation Task Force and the innovation efforts within the TSA, which have been very robust since 2007. They employed a crowdsourcing platform to gather workforce ideas and to bring them to life. I think we can look to other agencies such as NASA, who do fantastic things with gathering their very creative and very hardworking, mission-focused workforce to figure out the problems that they need to solve. We are just standing up our innovation hub, and so that is something that we're going to be doing in the coming fiscal year, and are excited to take that on. I will say we have so many exciting ideas that are emerging from our workforce, but being able to make best use of a platform that really helps to enable prioritization, categorization, response in a way that makes sense is going to be really helpful.
So speaking of workforce, we know that AI is going to dramatically change the workforce of the future. So how is CISA thinking about these changes, and what are the steps you're taking?
So I would say, first and foremost, we all recognize that AI is the coming wave of the future, and there are many ways that we need to integrate that into both our mission support work that we do. We are employing a great test of how we might be able to utilize AI through our human resources approach. We're using it to, with a very small test case, selectively identify and really find folks who would be applying for CISA jobs, folks that we would never come across otherwise. And so our ability to reach out to people who are new and different to government work has been really exciting. And I think it's an opportunity that we've seen not only resonates within with folks who are seeking jobs, but it also is filling very important needs within CISA to ensure that we have a really cutting edge skill set. And we're identifying folks who normally would never consider a career in government, but now are able to really see the benefits and to be part of a government agency in a way they never would have previously. So that's really exciting. I do think we've talked about some of the challenges that we would experience in utilizing technologies, and I do want to emphasize the fact that I think we're all familiar with the fact that the government traditionally has had a challenge in being able to procure technologies quickly and to bring them in. But I think we are doing some amazing things. The last several years has really changed the way in which procurement has taken place. And I'll point to DHS specifically, we basically have a remarkable number of authorities that allow us to bring on commercial technologies that we wouldn't have been able to access previously. There are some very inventive and creative procurement vehicles that we've been able to utilize. I'll highlight one called Commercial Solutions Opening Pilot Program, CSOP, and DHS has a current solicitation that's on the street for COVID CSOP proposals. And so we were able to, at CISA, to use that vehicle to bring on a technology called CREAS, which supports our emergency communications division. We were able to find the technology from our colleagues at the Air Force Innovation Effort, AFWERX, and we were able to utilize that vehicle and procure the technology in 18 days. And that is, I will say, record setting for us, and we're really excited to be able to make that happen. But most importantly, it shows that we can and we must be able to bring in commercial technologies in a way that benefits the mission and doesn't hamper and hang us up on the sometimes necessary evils of procurement that make it much more difficult, both for government as well as private sector. So that's a win I will take any day. Per my comments earlier regarding those heroic efforts, there were a lot of heroic efforts that people across CISA performed to make sure that we were able to procure the technology. However, we're trying to look at the processes to figure out how do we turn this into a repeatable process for everyone.
No, that's wonderful. 18 days, you're beating the corporate sector. They can procure anything in 18 days.
Well, okay, we'll take it when we can get it, right?
So we know that cybersecurity itself is changing with AI. And so are you seeing any exciting innovations when it comes to the intersection of cybersecurity and AI? And are you partnering with any companies in the private sector to bring that to DHS?
So I think we can definitely say that this technology has changed the way in which we work. And I would say COVID has forced an even greater change than we ever could have possibly imagined just 10 short months ago. And kudos to our government agencies, kudos to our country, kudos to the globe for being able to basically pivot in a matter of a week. And I think we all see, even this podcast right here, right, is that we're doing things we wouldn't have done 10 months ago, and it had to have happened quickly. But I will say also, we have a significant number of folks in the USG workforce, millennials and soon the post-millennials, who for them, they've never operated in a way that wasn't tied to technology, whether it be smartphones or the internet or social media. And so government must pivot to include that way of operating in a way that makes sense for what is the future workforce. And so I think we've all done a great job to make that move quickly. However, I'll also say, I think there's a lot more that we're going to have to do. We're just learning, right? We're figuring out what works, what doesn't work. How does this serve our mission? How do we achieve our goals? I will say to CISA's credit, we literally did not miss a beat. We're able to pick right back up. We have a very small percentage of our workforce that must be in a classified space in order to do our work, but the majority of CISA's work is unclassified. And so we were able to operate in a new environment very quickly. I will say our colleagues across the US government, particularly in the intelligence community and with our DoD partners who must work within classified spaces, I think they've had a harder time in being able to pivot with the rest of the world. Much of their work just simply has not been able to be translated in the same way. And we know that, the amount of money that would take and the time that it would take in order to enable a ballooning of skiffs, classified spaces to do that work across the country, around the globe, would be extraordinary, and it's simply not possible. So I think they have a huge challenge. That is a different type of challenge in figuring out how to work within those classified spaces.
I'm going to take a moment to invite my colleague, Adam Wood, to join the discussion.
Thanks, Adam.
Hi, Sabra. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing well. So we were just talking about the challenges associated with some of the personnel from the IC adapting to, this new this new environment with COVID. So focusing on the human capital aspects of that previous question, particularly as DHS continues to integrate its people into that environment surrounded by AI and emerging tech. What do you see as those items that it must do at the agency level in order to not only develop a technologically well-versed workforce, but also one that's properly skilled and placed and managed? And what are the mission impacts if these changes aren't addressed?
That's a great question. I would say, we have to ensure that we really are doing what we need to do to ensure that we have a properly trained and adequately prepared workforce, that we're hiring folks who bring in the adequate skills. I think that is going to change over time, as I mentioned, with the millennial and soon to be post-millennial workforce that is going to force changes upon us. We won't be able to maintain the old ways of doing things. Clearly, though, there's also a significant portion of our existing workforce who operated in a different environment. And so we have to do what we can to keep them trained, identify what the skill sets are. We always look to the NIST's NICE cyber framework to understand what are the skill sets that are required for various jobs and how do we appropriately train and manage to those. But I do think, again, the difference in the generations, that we will have to modify, expectations, just as we're seeing right here, right? We've all had to move to a teleworking situation, which soon will become this is now a remote workforce. That's what it looks like. And that's another transition that we haven't really, that is just beginning to roll out because we understand that these are longer term situations than any of us actually anticipated. And there are a lot of benefits to it, right? I'm able to be a lot more productive. And I can tell you, I wouldn't have been in the office at 3:30, but I was able to come to this office at 3:30 today. So we're able to get a lot more done, right?
Yeah. So do you think, we understand where we are with, the trajectory on vaccines and therapeutics and things like that. So do you think that telework is not transitory in nature?
No, I think that we have to be able to do our work anywhere. And I think technology is enabling us to do that. So I know I could have given a good hit back the nice softball and hear all the great things this is doing, which again, I so salute what it is that we've been able to accomplish so quickly. But I would like to turn it back to your listeners and viewers and say that this is a real opportunity, I think, for all of us to look at, okay, where are we and what tools do we have in order to communicate, to collaborate, to build upon those partnerships, to really create that information sharing. And I think by necessity, we all were able to quickly pivot because we had existing tools that had capabilities that enabled information sharing or collaboration or common whiteboarding, right? but they might not have been ideal in terms of the solutions, but they were able to be employed immediately. So I think now we have the opportunity to really look at, okay, what do we have? What tools do we have? We've got Zoom, we've got Miro, we've got Jitsi, we've got WebEx, we've got Teams, we've got all these different capabilities, but how do we really look at the user experience? How do we really take into account design thinking in a way that would help us really understand and move forward what we've got to work with? I think we've all seen, and it's painful to watch, right? So our competence, our collective competence with these tools, it's a public experience and it is painful to watch. Because, oftentimes you're having to learn in real time a new tool that you've never learned previously. Certainly, the catchphrase of 2020 is, can you hear me? Because we have so many problems with ensuring that our technology is working or that our agencies have the bandwidth in order to manage that communication or the whiteboarding session or whatever it is. So I think we have to lower the barriers of entry for technologies that are helping us work virtually. Whether it be whiteboarding or information sharing or communication. We have to do more to train people so that they can feel comfortable in using these tools. We have to make them much more user-friendly so that people can move from one platform to another depending on who it is that they're communicating with. And I think we really have to work on understanding what the cultural mores are and how we really deal with the fact that, okay, am I going to turn on my camera during this conversation, or is it okay for me to be not camera ready and deal with the shower later in the day? So I think there are all these ways of interacting that we haven't really gotten used to, and we don't have, you certainly don't have formal processes, much less informal processes.
And I think that the societal norms surrounding the personnel activity being actively engaged has certainly changed. And I think that, given where we are, I think everybody needs to be a bit more empathetic to people's situations.
Cybersecurity threats are real. As we look at the global landscape, you've got various national actors trying to engage with the U.S. and your agency is doing a splendid job in preventing these actors from being successful. How do you think about balancing such threats with privacy concerns and those kind of narratives that you also, are important?
Well, that's a great question. Something that we dealt with when I was at the Office of Director of National Intelligence. We quickly learned that, it's not a balance of security and privacy. Both are important. And how do we ensure that we're enabling both of those at the same time? And so I think our common understanding as a nation is maturing. I think there's always a higher degree required for government to ensure that they're keeping the highest standards possible and protecting our citizens in the way that we know they need to be protected. And so I think, having open discussions about what privacy tools exist, about what privacy exists on social media, on tools that are being utilized. I know we've all been thrust into with the challenge of dealing with working online and virtually. We've all had to face the issues of, how do we keep safe and how do we do what we need to do to protect our nation's secrets, and even information that shouldn't be made public. How do we make sure that we're doing what is right to keep things safe?
So when we think of operational readiness, AI is playing an important role on the military side. How are you leveraging AI or scaling it across DHS?
Right. So I think across DHS, that's a very operational CISA is the eighth component, operational component within DHS. And our mission is very different, and our structure is very different from many of the other component agencies, such as FEMA, our TSA, Customs and Border Patrol, the Secret Service, the Coast Guard, things of that sort, who by definition are ensuring that they're dealing with operational challenges each and every day. And so they definitely have to figure out how to utilize AI in order to enable their missions. For CISA, our role is primarily to ensure that the owners and operators of critical infrastructure understand the cyber and physical threats that face them and how they might mitigate those threats. And so we're about communicating with the stakeholders that we have, and that we are understanding what their challenges are in terms of the technology that they're working with. However, I think there's a lot of opportunity, as I mentioned earlier, in regards to the mission support aspects of what it is that CISA does. How do we do a better job of utilizing technology to enable faster, quicker, better hiring practices? Or how do we work within our financial structures, our budgeting, our contracting, things of that sort, to make best use of technology? Or even the infrastructure that CISA has itself. How do we really ensure that we are keeping nimble and fresh to enable every technical advantage that we need to have available at our fingertips?
So when we think of leveraging some of the latest advancements in technology, the idea of workforce development takes center stage. It's essential if you're going to be successful. So how are you upskilling your current employees or thinking about that?
That's right. So there are, I will say, having come from private sector and then going into the government, I will say the government really does do a phenomenal job of identifying necessary skill sets, providing training, understanding training needs across the U.S. government. It is truly remarkable, the amount of training that is available. I think the challenge is how do we really stay on the cutting edge and recognize what it is that is taking place in the commercial sector, and how do we stay on top of that? So again, finding skill sets when we're hiring our workforce, and then quickly understanding what skill sets are required and how do we train folks to best meet those challenges. Absolutely fundamental to ensuring that we're staying ahead of the curve.
Any parting words for our audience?
You know, I definitely want to emphasize the fact that I think part of what it is that we're going to have to be working on in the future is curating data more effectively and ensuring, to enable the technologies that are coming and that we'll be using in the future. I'm very proud of CISA, just appointed Chief Data Officer, and I'm excited about what will come with his work. But I think we're seeing just overall, it's how do we ensure the security of the data that we have? And that really is an extension of the mission that we have at hand. And it's our job to ensure that we're doing right, not only by stakeholders of critical infrastructure, but also by our mission as well.
Thank you very much, Sabra. This has been such a pleasure.
That's great, Harpreet. Thanks. I've been pleased to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.